When is the right time to sell a stock? How do you protect against inflation? Financial decisions can be tricky. Your cognitive and emotional biases can lead you astray. Financial Decoder, an original podcast from Charles Schwab, can help. Listen at schwab.com/financial decoder.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Life can change in an instant. My brother-in-law died suddenly, leaving behind my sister and her 2 young kids. He didn't have life insurance, so now they're facing the unthinkable, leaving their home. After seeing what they went through, I immediately called SelectQuote to get life insurance for my family. In 15 minutes, a licensed insurance agent compared policies from highly rated carriers to find me the right coverage in my budget. I got a $500,000 policy for only $16 a month. Plus, I qualified for same-day life insurance. No medical exam was required, and I was covered by the time I hung up. Even if you have a health concern, SelectQuote agents can find you the right policy at the lowest price. And while you can't prepare emotionally for a loss, SelectQuote can give you peace of mind with life insurance. Don't wait until it's too late.
Go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote today. That's SelectQuote.com. SelectQuote.com. Details on example rate at SelectQuote.com.
One thing that stands out to me off the top of my head, besides interviews with the Murder Sheet about the Delphi case, because that's a lot to talk about, but the episode that stood out to me was your interview with Erlinda Johnson, the prosecutor who worked on the Alec Baldwin case, just because I really followed that case closely and was really taken aback about her decision to do what she did, and really wanted to learn more about the circumstances that led up to that decision. And really just, after listening, have a ton of respect for what she did. And because it was not the path of, that was not the easy path to take.
That's Alora Content, a listener from Ohio.
So, Jason, I would say, too, the other thing, I appreciate your leadership and paired with Brett and Alice and then Anya and Kevin and the podcasts and discussions that you guys have had about the ethics. I mean, that is so, it is such a big old can of worms, right? And so many people, I mean, honestly, a lot of these things we don't know. We don't really know because we weren't there. Most of these murders like that, the only people who really know is the killer and the victims aren't alive, right? And so people get in all these battles and all this crazy stuff, and short of having a video of the actual murder, you don't know for sure. And I just love the focus on ethical, compassionate approach rather than all this crazy stuff.
That's Marie Holdridge, a listener from Texas. This is the Silver Linings Handbook podcast. I'm Jason Blair. This is a part of a discussion I recently had on the meaning of the holiday, family, friendship, and community with 2 of our listeners as we head toward the end of the year. I thought it would be nice to celebrate this year and this episode with 2 listeners I've met over the course of the past few years working on the podcast. These 2 listeners are people that I often receive feedback from and consult on different aspects of the podcast. Going to go ahead and talk about what's really important. And I think one of those things is that we don't stick to a script in episodes like this or any of our episodes. Our 2 guests are Marie Holdridge, a Texas woman who's a small businesswoman who's been listening to the podcast for the last 2 years, and Alora Constant, a speech therapist from Ohio who also joined us for this conversation. Thanks a lot for listening, and I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Talk to you all soon if you reach out. And with that, let's do this. So, Laura, Marie, I want to thank you for joining. I've appreciated, I say this about many of my listeners. I really enjoy, one thing I love about podcasting is you get an opportunity that you don't get in a lot of fields, like thinking back to when, I wrote for newspapers. You don't really get a chance to engage with the people who consume what you're doing. And one of the things, I'll say about this year is probably about like half the ideas I've done this year have come from suggestions of different listeners who are here. So, another thing that I love about this work is you have an opportunity as a listener, as a consumer, to really be a part of the creation. And I appreciate that part, and I appreciate you guys. But I wanted to give you a chance to just share a little bit about yourselves, some of your plans for the holidays with family, friends, or whatever it is. So, Maria, I'm going to let you go ahead and start.
Okay. Well, the big thing about me is that I'm quasi-retired, but had to kind of go back to work because of our family business and some changes that occurred there. So that's kind of rocked my world a little bit this year. My husband, I guess I feel like one of my biggest accomplishments, besides having a career in healthcare as a nurse and finishing as an executive in health insurance, was just the fact that my husband and I just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And this summer, we got married at age 17. And
Wow.
just blessed for that. As far as the holidays, we do kind of quiet holidays. We're going to get together with our kids. This is our extremely busy time of year for our business. And so we'll be taking a trip to Nashville in January. And that's kind of when we get to let our hair down and have a bit of a holiday. But love the winter holidays, love Christmas. It's just such a neat time of the year.
Yeah. And you had an awesome 50th anniversary celebration this year. You don't hear as much or a lot. My parents had their 50th anniversary the year before in 2023, and it was amazing. And it was amazing to think how rare it is that you find a partner that you can grow with like that, because we all change so much over time.
Yes.
It's very hard.
I mean, my husband is an amazing person. He's so much better than I am. But, we just grew together as kids and, just worked hard all our lives and everything. And one of the things that we did for our anniversary, I'm not a pack rat, but when we got married, I saved some things back. And so one of the things that we did at our party is we had a whole table full of different things that I had saved, like from we were so poor. We were just teenagers. Our honeymoon was Six Flags. And then we stayed overnight at a hotel in Fort Worth. And I saved the menu from a Pizza Inn, and a whole meal was $1.79.
It's perfect.
Wow.
Wish I could pull that off.
Anyway, but it was fun. We got to connect with a lot of family and friends. The gal that was my maid of honor, again, very small wedding in Roy's parents' home. Sorry about my Frenchies barking in the background. If it gets too obnoxious, I have to go get her. But anyway, my best friend in high school was my maid of honor, and her mother made my wedding dress. And I actually had the wedding dress on display. And then we had a photo slideshow going on. And so when Sue came up, the picture of me standing with her mother, with me in my dress and everything, and then her son.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh my God.
That's so awesome.
Amazing. Her mother has since passed with breast cancer, and it just meant the world to her and to me.
Be a part of. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Enough about me.
Yeah, right. And And you're in Texas, and Laura, you're in Ohio, right?
Yes, Ohio.
Interestingly, this year, both states were in the top 5 states for our listeners. So I'll just say you guys were downloading all the episodes.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Let's go Texas and Ohio, represent.
Yeah, that'll be next year. The but Alora, just curious if you want to share a little bit about yourself and what your plans are for the holiday and anything that's
Yes. Thank you so much for asking. And also, Marie, I'm so
Grab my dogs. Will stop. She's barking at a toy. Give me.
no worries.
no problem. I was just gonna say, I'm so excited to get to know Marie a little bit more. Hearing that she's a nurse or has a background in nursing, I definitely connect with that. I am a speech and language pathologist, and and so my full-time job is doing speech and language therapy. But in my personal life, I have a definitely deep interest in true crime, and that's why I'm so lucky to have met Jason. And at CrimeCon, just getting to interact with other people that have the same interest as myself is just awesome because, again, my friends here in Ohio, not interested in true crime. So connecting with other people that also enjoy it and other topics to talk about is just really heartening.
Yeah, and it's interesting about true crime listeners because when I originally started, I never really thought or imagined that a big part of the base for the podcast would be true crime listeners. But I've noticed that, that a lot of people who follow true crime are really caring people. They really have a lot of altruistic motivations. And I think that's part of the reason why, as counterintuitive as it might seem, they gravitate toward it, because I'm just as likely to see posts from one of you guys about helping someone or donating to something or about self-care as I am about true crime. And I would have never guessed that coming into that. So let me ask both of you, what do you think caused you to gravitate toward listening to what you listen to? And what do you listen to?
Great question. Marie, do you want to go first or should I go first?
So for me, I'll start with the last question. I listen to a lot of true crime, but I listen to other things as well. I love to read. I love things historical, so I like things in that genre as well. I've always been just into, I like science, right? And so a lot of the true crime stuff, I think my first introduction to like true crime things was like that old TV show Forensic Files. And so when I used to travel for work, I would watch it or whatever. But I really just like the knowing about it and kind of the mystery, and then thinking and looking toward the solution for things like that. This just a bit of personal stuff for me. My father was murdered when I was 3 years old by a family member, a distant a stepfather. And I don't know if that, just knowing that he, that's what happened to him, if that kind of planted the seed for me, of just being interested.
Yeah. And I also think, I mean, to your point about like, I think one of the things that causes people, and it just, in addition to caring about people, one of the things that I've noticed about people who gravitate toward true crime is they're often puzzle solvers. They like solving puzzles. And I think that sometimes when we have experiences in early life that are a mystery to us, I think we can gravitate toward it. I remember the first crime I knew, and I'm not going to get my age right, but it was something, it had to be like before 3, and I didn't even know it was a crime or what it was. But one day, a bunch of our family friends just showed up on our front door. So this is like the late 1970s. They showed up on our front door, and years later, I found out what had happened was the father in the family had been murdered on his commute back from DC to the Maryland suburbs. And I don't know if it started there, but I've always had a fascination and a wonder in how we get to the point where people think that violence is the only answer or the right answer. And I know there are lots of different ways people get there, but I think I've always just had a natural curiosity about it. Laura?
Yeah, definitely. Also just wanted to say to both of you, like, so sorry to hear about your losses. I have not firsthand experienced what it's like to, have a family member be taken in such a horrific way. But I just want to say, I'm sorry for your loss. And, I hope you continue to like hold on to their memory or legacy and continue to, bring that light and carry that with you moving forward. But going back to what got me into true crime, I think my story is pretty similar to a lot of other people. I was in college at the time and COVID happened, which forced a lot of us to find other hobbies to keep us occupied with all of this sudden time we had. So I think that was the year that I really started, I think a friend might have recommended a certain podcast to me, and that kind of got me hooked to want to learn more. The podcast originally recommended to me was really interesting. They covered new cases very frequently, but they didn't really do the deep dives and get like more details and get the fuller picture, which was something I was looking for. So I think eventually after doing, just getting exposed to different things and looking up different things, I found my way to the Prosecutor's podcast, which was really the first time I listened to a podcast that I thought did really thorough research and really went and did deep dives on the cases I was interested in.
I call them the gateway drug.
Yes, I was introduced to them, and then that's kind of what got me, to follow them, or just listen to them consistently. And then my love for true crime grew. I, signed up to go to CrimeCon, where I also got to, meet them in person and then meet other fans and listeners and really discover a community that was just so welcoming and just so inviting. And so I really am thankful that CrimeCon even exists. So we have opportunities to meet people
In person.
like that. Yeah.
I can't remember whether it was Brett and Alice from the Prosecutors or Kevin Greenlee and Anya Kane from the Murder Sheet, but I was recently talking to them, and I've said this before, that COVID was the point where it's not where I started following true crime, but I really got back into it. But it is the start of my interest in podcasts. And I used to listen to Kevin and Anya, their coverage of the murders of Abby Williams and Liberty Tremaine and Delphi, and started following that. And then Brett and Alice from Prosecutors were on there, which is what led me to them. And I was telling one of them recently, I'm the groupie who joined the band. So thanks for letting me in and letting me be part of this. And it's kind of, it goes to the point that I was making earlier, that you really are a part of a real community. And I actually think that's a huge part of it. And you can see it in really beautiful ways. You can see it in some sad ways. When a creator's going off a cliff, the whole community will go with them. And, I used to wonder, like, why do you guys go off the cliff? And then I realized it's not that you're losing your favorite podcast or you're losing, something small. It's actually your community that you're really trying to hold on to. And I thought that was just an interesting observation, that so much of this is really about community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
The first podcast I listened to was The Murder Sheet because of the Delphi murders, because a friend of mine kind of got me into that one. So just got very, very interested in that case, and then heard the prosecutors and then started listening to them. And then Jason, and so like those three are my top three. I listened to Crime Garage a little bit too. I like them. But the one thing that the prosecutors did for me was their deep dive into John Benet Ramsey. That changed my mind, because, all the stuff that was out there really tried to make it sound like that it was family, right? That when they started doing their deep dive into it, and the big thing that convinced me was the discussion of the note, the ransom note, because people in the media are out there saying, "Oh, it's her handwriting," and they said, "No, if you're not looking at the original, it's not a valid assessment." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how sad
Right.
for her, to anyway." I can't even imagine.
Oh, I had literally the exact similar experience as you. I am obviously, like, I'm very empathetic and caring. I react very deeply to emotional things. So, like, a certain documentary about the John Benet Ramsey case, certain things that are out there really led me to believe one thing. And what I like about podcasts like The Murder Sheet, Prosecutors, Silver Linings, is that it challenges me to stop my emotional reaction kind of and pause and really critically think about things, which is always good practice for everybody because a lot of times we are communicating with spontaneous reactions and we're not really taking the time to critically think about the evidence and different things they point out. And then that John Benet Ramsey case really changed my mind. It really did.
Yeah, and that was an interesting one for me. I was already sort of like on the intruder theory, but I felt like it solidified my view on it. And I would never want anybody to stop their emotional reaction. One way to think about it is you just want to know what your emotional biases are so you can filter the logical choices. And that's one of the things I love about my guests. I very often will come into an episode. I don't know if you guys can tell. I'll come in with sort of like a thought that this episode is about X. And it's hilarious because I'll tell my editor, this episode is going to be on blah, blah, blah. Then I'll go and do the interview and I'll be like, never mind. The episode is actually on this other thing. And I was going to ask you guys, were there any episodes that you really enjoyed this year or that stood out to you or guests that you were interested in?
One thing that stands out to me off the top of my head, besides interviews with the Murder Sheet about the Delphi case, because that's a lot to talk about. But the episode that stood out to me was your interview with Erlinda Johnson, the prosecutor who worked on the Alec Baldwin case, just because I really followed that case closely and was really taken aback about her decision to do what she did and really wanted to learn more about the circumstances that led up to that decision. And really just after listening, have a ton of respect for what she did. And because it was not the path of, that was not the easy path to take. Yeah, exactly. So that one stands out to me.
I really enjoyed talking to her, and that is actually, Laura, to your point, that's an example. I thought, I really thought we'd come in and we would talk primarily about the case, but what I really realized in talking to her and realizing her family history in Venezuela and that her family had experienced a justice system that really, and I don't even want to call it a justice system, a legal system that didn't promote justice, that she had a deep appreciation for how the American justice system is different. And, she laid out this idea that we have a constitution that's kind of amazing and all these other things. But she said, all of that is only as good as the people who are in there. And that was part of what motivated her. And that was really powerful to me. And I think it could be applied to any field, right? It could be applied to healthcare, teaching. It could, we could have the best systems, processes, the most money in the world, but they're only going to be as good as the people that we have. So Marie, throw it over to you.
So of course, because I am a true crime kind of junkie person, I love the collabs you did with Allison Dixon on the Girl Scout murders.
Oh yeah.
And then of course your stuff on the Green River.
Yep. On Oklahoma. You mean Lewis Clark Valley, or yes? Yep.
But yes.
No, I know what you mean.
Those are both so good, Jason. And then I will have to say, and I'm terrible with remembering like the name of the actual podcast, but the one where you interviewed or discussed with the woman who came in and did all those changes in healthcare for the veterans.
Oh yes, yeah. Are you thinking about wait, was that this year?
It
I'm
might
trying
have
to think.
been last year,
It may
Jason.
have been. Yeah. What was it that struck you for that about that one?
To me, just her compassion and caring and her ability to be so ethical and push things forward as they needed to go. But honest, with your interview with her, the other thing that I kept thinking is, how cool is it that Jason gets to talk to such amazing people?
It's really funny. I always say I would do the podcast if I had one listener that was getting help by it. But one of my colleagues, Abby, she points out I would do the podcast if 0 people were interested in it, just so I could have the opportunity to talk to such cool.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is neat. Yeah, and that was a last year episode, and I really love that. So this year, Allison and I made the decision to venture into actually doing true crime episodes. I still deny that I'm a true crime podcast. I think I'm true crime adjacent, but there are just a couple cases that I care deeply about.
Yeah.
One is that Lewis Clark Valley serial killer, because you have something like 14 victims or more that don't have justice. And we pretty much know who the perpetrator is. And so, like, closing that gap for justice for those families, we know who that very living perpetrator is, who is living his best life in North Carolina right now. And that, that for me, bringing attention and awareness to that pushes past my desire to not, do pure true crime. And then Oklahoma actually came out of the inspiration for that. Early in the year, I did an interview with Monty Frank. He lost his daughter, Nada. Indigenous woman. She went missing several times when she was 16.
Yes.
Monty was with us in Minnesota for the meetup yesterday, and she was trafficked. But eventually she started to get her life back on track and then was murdered by a boyfriend. And so Monty, one of the things, another example, I thought we were just going to be talking about the problem of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we ended up actually talking more deeply about the Indigenous experience, which then, to your point about CrimeCon, I met a couple other people there who became guests on the show, Darlene Gomez and Vanjie Randall Shorty. I met through Gabby Petito's parents at CrimeCon. But what inspired the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders is really being able to look at the way that race, being Indigenous, being different in any way affects the criminal justice system. And, in part, I came into it sort of thinking that I would believe that the suspect, who was Native, was the one who did it. About halfway through, I'm like, maybe this isn't him. I came back around in the end to it probably is him. But in a weird way, I think it gave you a deeper insight about the problems with the justice system, even when the person is likely guilty. So I've enjoyed that. And I think I'll probably do more of it in the new year. Allison and I haven't told anybody, but we have an idea for a podcast. But
Oh, very exciting. I think the two of you together are brilliant. So whatever you guys decide to do is going to be great.
That's what our friends say.
Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, you go.
I was going to say another episode that stood out to me. I think it was this year. I think you did you interviewed Brett about Dyatlov Pass too, following up about Dyatlov Pass, and just some like maybe other theories that they didn't go into more detail about when they covered it and whatnot. And again, I just love that interview so much just because it, again, your sense of mystery and wonder, and just like, again, it cuts against every like logical Occam's razor, theory that comes to mind. So it really makes you stop and think about other things that could be happening in that situation. So that's another episode that, again, I don't have an answer to by the time I listened, but it did, engage me in just thinking about other possibilities I hadn't considered before.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about, Occam's razor is that when you've considered all the probabilities and none of them apply, then you start looking toward the impossible. And every October, I like to do episodes every October on things that, really are improbable or are mysteries. And Brett, you may have heard Brett say that 20% of their listeners go away during October because they do, Halloween episodes. And I don't know if that 20% is coming over to my podcast, but actually October is my highest month of downloads for 2 years in a row. And I'm like, man, I don't know what's going on here, but
maybe saying something. Yeah, I think they're coming over to get a little break of the horror and craziness. Get
let's
some
do mystery. Right?
Yes.
And it's really interesting because I think that idea, to your point about Dyatlov Pass, it fits in that world of puzzle solving. It fits in that world of mystery. But there's always been, I've had different points in my life where I've been more or less spiritual, probably since my mom died more. But one of the things I've always believed, as somebody who believes in science, is that science is limited in what it can know. And then there are also mysteries that operate within what we know. We don't have the clues, but there are these really cool things that are possibly beyond our current understanding. And I love to explore those and not have the fear to go into those, not be afraid to go into those places where you sort of know you're probably not going to get a reasonable answer.
Right, but still worth the time to discuss because you never know. Every person I talk to, has a different perspective and may say something that, sparks something that I had never thought of. And who knows where that kind of, discussion could lead. And maybe more cases one day will eventually, we'll have answers to with more discussion and more people bringing their thoughts to the table.
Calling all dog owners. Your furry friend deserves top-notch nourishment, and Ollie delivers the clean, fresh nutrition your dog needs in 5 flavors they'll absolutely flip over. Ollie is made in U.S. kitchens with ingredients carefully sourced from trusted growers and producers around the world, with absolutely no harmful fillers or preservatives. With protein-first recipes like fresh beef with sweet potatoes, fresh turkey with blueberries, or fresh lamb with cranberries, you might start thinking, dang, my dog eats better than I do. And that's probably true when it comes to Ollie. Give your pup a fresh start this new year by letting them taste test a personalized meal plan with Ollie. Head to ollie.com/Wondery. Tell them all about your dog and use code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box of meals when you subscribe today. Plus, they offer a clean bowl guarantee on the first box. So if you're not completely satisfied, you'll get your money back. That's OLLIE.com/Wondery and enter code WONDERY to get 60% off your first box. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie. Start your dog's new year off right with Ollie.
Ready to prioritize yourself in the new year? Your skin is a great place to start. Dime Beauty, founded by a master esthetician, is more than just a skincare company. With 4 skin-conscious categories, skincare, beauty, body care, and fragrance, Dime offers simple, spa-worthy products that will help you enter 2025 with confidence. Whether you're revitalizing your regimen with nourishing products or building one from scratch, Dime makes it easy. The Work System, our all-in-one best-selling routine, includes a cleanser of your choice, toner, serums, and moisturizers, taking the guesswork out of skincare for your healthiest, happiest skin yet. Dime's commitment to clean ingredients and sustainable packaging ensures every product is as gentle on your skin as it is on the planet. With thousands of glowing 5-star reviews and a loyal community, the results speak for themselves. Revive your skin and give yourself the routine refresh you deserve by visiting dimebeautyco.com. That's dimebeautyco.com. Your best skin awaits.
You guys both mentioned, in your earlier comments, you both mentioned community, and I was curious what community means to you guys.
Some things that come to mind when I think of a community, I think of, being able to be yourself around other people without feeling the need to mask who you are or pretend to be somebody that you're not. Be in an environment around people who accept you for as you are and always show you respect. And I think just that freedom to be yourself without being judged is very powerful when I think of community.
Yeah, so that's so valid. For me, I think, like, you can't help the family you're born into, right? And so sometimes there's, dysfunction or things that aren't so good, but in a community you choose. And you are able to hang out with people that are supportive, or that you can support them and they support you. And like you said, Alora, they accept you for who they are, and there's a certain level of respect. And you hate to lose that, but sometimes you do have to kind of walk away from one if it goes south. I've left some of the chats associated with some of the podcasts just because it's turned, well, for a long time I tried to stay in there just with positive comments to try to tone it down a bit. But finally it's like, it's just not worth the stress.
It's very funny. I'm like you, Marie. Someone dropped in one of the podcast chats where there was lots of fighting going on. I hadn't been involved, but I saw this because they had tagged me. They said, I found Jason Blair's spirit animal. And it was a video of a cat, two cats getting ready to fight, right? And they're like hissing at each other and they're getting ready to go at each other. And another little cat walks walks between them and just stands between them and stands between them until they get there. And I have that natural tendency myself to try to make peace, right? But there becomes a point, right, where for yourself, for your well-being, for everyone, you have to step back. So I have this episode I think it will come out after this episode comes out. It might come out before it, but with a guy named Jack Fox. And Jack comes from the world of media, has gotten into the world of statement analysis. And what he does is he analyzes statements for truth or not. And one of the coolest things in the episode that we kind of realize as we get to the end of it, actually the work he does, if you apply it to your everyday life, may comfort some of your anxiety because you're more likely to find out more is true than you worry about, right? And, you have that skeptical view. But one of the things that we talked about afterwards that I wish we had captured in the episode was, this concept of people, and you see this in statements, in whether it's in crimes or it's, in a relationship, that people really, they try to answer your questions, but they really talk about what's on the top of their mind. So you'll often see somebody make a statement, and then halfway through, they'll make a statement about something that seems totally unconnected and then back down. People talk about what's on top of their mind. And I told Jack, well, very clearly this year, for me, there's an episode that's never been done, but that runs like a thread through every episode of this year. And it's been about loss. Here I go again. I lost my mom in October of 2023, and then also experienced additional losses throughout the year. But one of the things that, Alice from the prosecutors actually reminded me of this, that suffering is universal and we all go through suffering. And I know, Laura, you mentioned, how you were sorry for our losses, but we all suffer. And it's one thing that unites all of us. And you can see it running, like if you listen carefully through my episodes, like really they could be on whatever topic. What I'm really talking about this year is loss. That has been the theme. And one of the things that I think I've really realized in my loss as an interviewer, as a friend, as just a human being in all aspects of life, is that my loss and acknowledgement of other people's suffering allows me to love people more deeply. I have on the blessing side of that, I have landed like in the right moment in certain people's lives this year to be able to provide a tremendous amount of help to them and other things like that. So I really, we all go through loss, whether it's like loss of our younger self, our dreams, our mistakes. And certainly when I was at the New York Times, that was a big sense of loss for me, but we all go through loss. And I was just curious about like how it's impacted you guys and what you've gained from it.
Such a great question. Marie, I might have to have you talk first and give me a minute to collect my thoughts on that.
So, Jason, to your point, none of us get out of this world without scars, right? I mean, living and being a human, we're going to get those emotional scars along with the physical scars, et cetera. The sense of loss, like for me, when my father, I never really was able to grieve his death. I don't want to, get into too much, but what I will say is that as a child, I lived in an extremely dysfunctional home. And I was never told the truth about what happened to him. It was played out a completely different way than what really did happen. And so when my husband and I got, past child rearing era and all that, and, I talked with him and I said, so this was like in 2019. I told him, I said, we need to do a bucket list. We've worked hard all our lives. We need to start doing things that matter to us. And he told me, so I said, what do we want to do? What's the first thing we want to do? And this is reflective of who my husband is. He says, I want to take you to Montana to see your dad's grave because I've never been there. I've never. And a friend of ours had his tombstone on a website. I mean, I'd never been there. Anyway. And so just to be able to go there and, he was murdered in Missoula, Montana, but we traveled there and I was doing a lot of research on newspapers.com. And I was at my great uncle, his uncle. So my paternal grandmother's brother is the person who kind of held the family together on that side. And he had done a bunch of newspaper clippings and various things. I have my father's little business card where he opened up a little electronics business there. What he was living in Missoula with his mother initially. My birth mother had abandoned my sister and myself, and Uncle Jimmy, the great uncle, was taking care of us. My father was trying to get a business off the ground so that he could then provide for my sister and myself. And then when he was murdered, everything changed. And the birth mother came back because she had one other child that was conceived when my father was still living, even though they weren't living together. And because the divorce wasn't final, she got Social Security for one child. So it didn't take her too hard to figure out that she could get two more and get 3 Social Security checks. And so that's kind of what happened there. Anyway, and not to get into all that, but it was so cool to go there and go to the courthouse and have them make photocopies of the records of the trial. The perpetrator pled guilty, so there wasn't as much information, but what I got was extremely telling, along with just other information. I actually got to go to the house where my father originally had his little business and was living. And the woman was so nice, and she let us walk through. And the room where my father's business was down in the basement originally was still unfinished. So it was like it was when he was there. Anyway,
Wow.
So cool. It meant the world to me to be able to do that and to just go and see where he was buried and put flowers on his grave. After he was murdered, the family, my paternal grandmother and his 2 half sisters moved away. No one ever came back. And so, yeah, anyway, I didn't mean to get into all that. But
So Marie, I have a guest coming on in January, a woman named Lisa Sugarman, and she actually found me. And part of her story is that when she was a young girl, her father died, and she had been told that it was a heart attack, but 30 years later, she found out it was a suicide. And one of the things that we were talking about is like, how open should you be with children about the truth? And what she said, in retrospect, her entire family would agree to try to be more open. They didn't know what to do. They didn't have the world. because she said it was like losing her dad twice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be just so hard to process at that. It's with so much time that has gone by, you're to, go through that grieving process of not only losing your loved one, but also learning the actual manner of how they left can be hard to process, I'm sure. But Marie, I just wanted to say, like, I really hope that experience going to put flowers or whatever at your father's grave, like, and giving him that space and time. I feel like that really honored his memory. And I hope that, like, after you had that trip, you felt a sense of connection with him.
I did. I mean,
Good.
it's vilified to me, and the story that I was told was that his murder was justified, and what I was told is not true. It's not true at all, because if what I was told about my father, if that had been the reason that he was murdered, that would have been brought out in the court proceeding, and it wasn't. Plus, I actually asked some family members about that, and
it wasn't true. Right. And then you also have to deal with, in that situation, a sense of betrayal, right? That for the people who weren't truthful with you. One of the things that was interesting too this year, and this was not intentional on my part, but it connects to the theme. I had a chance to talk to Bruce Maitland, to his daughter, Brianna.
Yeah.
In 2004, I think, 17-year-old daughter disappeared in Vermont. And then Julie Murray, whose sister Maura disappeared in like a month apart from Brianna in New Hampshire. And it was neat to see how those two families actually support each other and love each other, and have been rocks for each other. But in listening to the many people that I've talked to this year, Bill Thomas is one. His sister died in the Colonial Parkway murders. Is the importance, and Bruce brought this out the most, of letting people find their own way to grieve, and that it's different for everyone. I think we struggle sometimes when our friends or our loved ones are hurting. We don't know what to say, or we have the Google answer of what to say, but really just sort of like respecting whatever journey they need to take to heal. And I'm like you, Marie, those things like a visit and putting flowers on the grave. I'm sure in January I'll go visit my mom's grave on her birthday. But I found myself, you guys both brought up the Delphi murders with Abby and Libby. So much happened with that case in 2003. There were leaks of pictures. There were all sorts of dramatic issues and back and forth. And I had to just pull away from the case and the conversations. And I had a friend who really encouraged me to do something to help myself therapeutically. And I went out there for a couple days and visited the bridge that they were on and other places. It was so healing. I remember just sitting there for me and finding this amazing sense of peace. And, I took a trip to Minnesota where I saw Monty Frank, who I, interviewed about his daughter, and same kind of healing came from that. And I would have, if you had asked me before, would these things be helpful? I would have been like, yeah, no way. No, I'm going to sit here in my ball. And I think that other thing, when you are suffering, being open to the ideas that people have.
Yeah. So, Jason, I would say too, the other thing, I appreciate your leadership, and paired with Brett and Alice, and then Anya and Kevin, and the podcasts and discussions that you guys have had about the ethics. I mean, that is so. It is such a big old can of worms, right? And so many people. I mean, honestly, a lot of these things we don't know. We don't really know because we weren't there. Most of these murders like that, the only people who really know is the killer and the victim, and the victims aren't alive, right? And so people get in all these battles and all this crazy stuff, and short of having a video of the actual murder, you don't know for sure. And I just love the focus on ethical, compassionate
Mhm.
wrote rather than all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, there's nothing about compassion that precludes the truth, right? And there's nothing about a pursuit for the truth that doesn't that involve where you can't be compassionate. There is always a way to do both. And I just think some of it is a lack of education among the creators, and some of it is, some of it is, what I would consider morals that do not align ideally with the ones that I have. Um, but I do think some of it is, really about letting people, whether it's the listeners or the creators, knowing the impacts of different things really gives them an opportunity to be informed in making their choices. And I think that part, to me, is really important because I really do believe this, there is such a bright side to true crime. Like the impact of advocates, the impact of listeners, awareness, the number of things where we've seen where people have heard there's a missing person in their area on a podcast or on a social media feed, and they've gone out and searched. There is an amazing bright side to true crime. I think we just need to get out of our way so that side can take over.
Yes. And remember that it's not about us at the end of the day. It's not about you. It's about the victims and being victim centered, and also talking to people with respect, even if you have different opinions.
I'm curious, have you guys ever felt, coming back to the idea of community, that there were moments in your lives where you felt like you didn't have a sense of community?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Honestly, until I found the true crime community, I did struggle to find my sense of community. You kind of associate yourself perhaps with, the school you're attending or what extracurricular activity you might be involved in. But as you grow up and really start living in the world, I found it hard to find my sense of community. But then following with my interest in the technology and the social media that has taken off with it, I feel like I have more of a community now than probably ever before, which is wonderful.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Marie?
So mine is almost the the inverse of what most people experience. My childhood, my mother moved constantly. The shortest I ever went to a school was 6 weeks. The
Wow.
longest was a year and a half. We moved all the time and never at the beginning of a school year at the end of a school year. So it was just crazy. So I didn't grow up like making established friends. So my family, my grandparents in Albuquerque, my great grandfather who lived with them, that was my little kind of microcosm of a community. But as I became an adult and became a professional, then through, church affiliation as well as work, connections, friends, etc. Then I did get kind of a network of friends, etc. And then I think that the true crime community or whatever these communities that we've gotten with these podcasts, it's a whole different thing because it's not limited to geography, right?
Right. Yep.
I have friends across the pond, friends in Australia, whatever. I mean, it is so cool. I just love it.
Yeah, I was just let's see. Within the last, I think, the hour before we started, I was talking to a friend from the broader podcasting community who is in Atlanta, another one who is in New York, another one who is in London, and I was asking that person, "Why aren't you in bed yet?" It's really neat to get all those varied perspectives. And I was going to ask you guys for one memorable thing for you this year, and what some of your maybe hopes and dreams for next year are.
Great question as always.
Mine's world peace.
I don't know. For me, I think the biggest thing this year that I hope to continue forward for next year is giving myself grace, not being so hard on myself, remembering that, you deserve a life full of happiness, and you just find your people, continue to make connections with those people, and no matter how hard things seem, there's always a person that's willing to listen to you. There's always a person you can count on. There's always a person that's going to make you feel less alone. So that's something I think I've been thinking about a lot. And I just hope next year I continue to be a little bit more present in the true crime community and just continuing to make connections with other people.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think it's true. I think we sort of tell ourselves stories, stories about our own loneliness or that we're not deserving of something. And you'd be shocked at how many people are telling themselves similar stories. And, I think one of the keys is just finding each other, finding those other people who are telling themselves the same story.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. For me, and of course, if you think about the was it Erickson's stages of life, like what you go through. So, I'm in that point where, you're reflecting on the past and thinking through or whatever. And, we all make mistakes, right? Every one of us makes mistakes, and some things you can repair and some things you can't. And just pushing forward and moving forward. And, for me, learning not to just beat up on myself so much for the mistakes that I've made and trying to just where I can push forward with restoring a relationship or moving past something, and all that. And I just want to do more of that in 25. I want to be able to continue to restore relationships. Just I want to be like I envision how you are from what you said, Jason, in one of your podcasts where we talk about when you go in somewhere like to a Starbucks or whatever, that you think about what can I say positive to make that person feel better. And I think moving off of the self stuff, and looking more at others.
Yeah. And really being able to, I think it, I forget which episode I mentioned that and the point about going into Starbucks. And I was just thinking about this on the plane flight back to Minneapolis. And one of the flight attendants was just kind of taken aback by something I did. And it was something simple. She was coming with the snacks down the aisle. And you normally thank the person afterwards if you have good manner. But I just stopped her to thank her before she gave me anything. And she was like, "What?" I was like, "I want to just thank you. I know that this is a hard job and you're having to walk through the aisle and you're doing all these things that if you never know what that little piece of joy that you give that person is going to get passed on throughout their day and to other people." And I think about how grateful I am for the people who do things for me. When I was sitting at the Minneapolis event, surprising to me, one of the guests just turned and decided to give a speech about how meaningful some of the work that I was doing honored his daughter. And he said that, he's preparing to help build up other advocates because he feels like his daughter's story has been told. Now it's time for other people. And like with tears in his eyes, he said, because of what had happened on the podcast, 500 years from now, if there's an internet, there will be her story. And, like I receive those gifts from people all the time. So take that, pass it on. And I think we can and to your point also, Maria, I think it's really easy to let scars build up in life, and it's really easy to walk away from things. And I've had some beautiful moments where I had rifts with one particular person that I'm thinking of, and he bent over backwards. He had the courage to come and repair that. And I just view all those things as true gifts that you can give, and you're lucky when you receive them.
Oh, definitely. I love that story with the flight attendant because, it's so robotic. Like, what do you want? Okay, great. Move on to the next. And she was just literally so taken aback. Like, wait, what'd you say? Like, no, Coke or Sprite? Like, what'd you say? No. Like, she was so taken aback because she's probably not used to that sort of acknowledgement and things. So I just love that story. I try to keep that mindset because, again, you never know what people are struggling with. That small, kind gesture could, be the light that they really needed that day. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think about the clients I work with in mental health, and one of the patterns I've noticed is people become more depressed, they become more fragile, and the little things matter more. But I've had a number of clients who are suicidally depressed that where someone just doing an act of kindness made all the difference and turned them around. And I'll never forget this one client saying to me that like he was waiting for a phone call from someone. It wasn't a particularly significant person in his life, but he was like, if they don't call, I'm just going to kill myself. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, it's just a symbol of how people don't care. And it always struck me because the little things do matter. I did remind him that I'm on the phone with you right now. So someone
right?
cares.
Yes, of course.
Someone cares.
You know, as a child, for me, given the chaotic environment, I will say that the thing that kept me going as a child was in a teacher or somebody, either at church or in the neighborhood that just took an interest and did kindness, for me. As a little small crazy example, living in El Paso in a really bad area as a child in first grade and often without enough food. And that my best little friend, her name was Lupita. And every afternoon on the walk home from school, her mother would put a big old stack of tortillas and peanut butter and jelly on my porch, right? And I would eat, and I probably eat like half of them, right? And I'm sure they had no more money than anybody else, but they never said a negative thing, never
Wow.
negative thing. And I mean, to me, that was just, that level of caring and love and support, or, like a teacher patting your back and saying you did good. I mean, you don't know where a child or a person is coming from, to your point, Jason. And when we do take those opportunities to be kind, to say things, you don't know what difference you make in someone's life.
Yeah. And I think that some of the most powerful episodes for me personally in the last year or two have involved those people, the teacher. I interviewed a teacher this year, and another listener suggestion, and I was like, I don't know. And then this is a pattern with me. Someone suggests something, I'm like, um, and and then they came back and they said, I think it's time for you to honor your mom. You're ready now, right? My mom was a teacher. And in doing that episode, one of the neat things in listening to her talk and talking to her, I realized that part of what led her into teaching, and she focused on special education, were the little acts of kindness that she had from teachers in her life, and that she really paid it forward. And I think that was a big lesson for me of this year. And then, I think another great lesson of the year was that all grief is love that has nowhere to go. Like, I cannot tell you how many guests made that message to me in different words, whether they were talking about ghosts or going through a stroke or, losing their daughter, and ambiguous grief. And that grief that produces that love that has nowhere to go can create some pretty amazing things for other people. Yeah. And so before I wrapped up, I wanted to give you guys just a chance to give any closing thoughts on anything you want, what you want people to walk away with, if there's a message you'd like to share, if you want to add to my list of things that I should do in 2025.
I'll have Marie, you go first.
So my closing thoughts, and I know, I've touched on some things personal for me that are kind of downers or whatever, but, the thing that I see in life, I think is that if you go along for the ride, God, and I'm a Christian, right? But God has an amazing way of taking things that are very negative in your life and turning them into a very strong positive and creating an ability in you to comfort or help someone else, right? Or to see things or to move things forward. And so I see that in you, Jason, and Laura, I want to get to know you better, but I'm sure just knowing what profession you're in, I know you have that compassion as well. Just touching someone's life in a positive way and encouragement and just, that's kind of what we're here for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. I always think about how like everything that I unambiguously like about myself or that I get feedback in, particularly when people are giving me feedback, I really like this thing you're doing. It's all forged in suffering. Like all of it has been forged in the biggest mistakes I've made, the sort of like worst things that have happened have all made me a better human being. I didn't actually find what you were saying downers so much as I see them as part of what's made you into the amazing person you are. So
Definitely. I think for me,
before
yeah, go ahead.
you go, Maria, I wanted to say thank you for all your support this year.
Oh, Jason, my support's a little thimbleful compared to what you do for everybody else.
No, thank you. Sorry, Laura, go for it.
Oh, no. Again, Marie, so happy I got to have this conversation with you. I hope I get to know you better as well. I just hope people take away that, again, give yourself grace. And sometimes, life has a funny way of surprising you. And maybe you thought you were going down a certain path and you plan to go down a certain path, but you come to a point where you realize, this isn't serving me. This isn't filling my cup. I need to do something that is going to make me happy and something that's going to, continue my passion moving forward. And it's okay if, life takes you in a new direction that's unexpected. Trust that the things that are meant for you will come and have the patience to, to continue waiting for that opportunity.
That's a great message. I think that's a great message for all of us. And also, Laura, thank you for not running away from the guy which would be me, who came up to you to comment on your diet love path. At Climb Time. It's one of those many moments where in retrospect, I'm like, what I just did was weird, but
So glad you commented on it. Again, I probably would have never talked to you had you not said something about my Dyatlov Pass sweatshirt. So again, so glad you said something. It wasn't weird at all. Honestly, just so glad you said something and we got to connect and learn more about each other. So that was great.
Yeah. And I love having you guys around. I appreciate it. I've told people before that the people who listen, their ideas, their feedback, their encouragement are the fuel that keeps me going on. And I'll keep on going until either I run out of people I'm curious about or, even if I run out of people I'm curious about, if people are still getting something good from it, I'll keep on going. So thank you both.
Yes, keep going. I love listening to the different topics you cover. And again, you cover such a wide range. I'll have to think of some interesting ideas for you in the future.
Send them over. You know where to find me.
I will, definitely will. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll keep thinking of things as well. I love the variety of the things that you do, Jason. I think that adds even more, and the last time that we visited, when you mentioned that, your podcast is the palate cleanser for those of us that consume.
Right? Like the happy place. And I also told people, I was like, so I have an episode that's coming out this week on what we can learn from one Native American culture. And I said, it's like spinach. I will give you lots of good stuff that you want. Then you're going to have to learn a lesson from me. But, I think that it's true. I have listeners who gravitate because of self-care or mental health. And then I have listeners who gravitate because of true crime. And I'll often hear from people who come in because of self-care or some other issue, they'll get exposed to something in true crime that they learn from and help them. And the same thing with the people who are in true crime. So, probably one of my real big blessings of the last few years has been to have this space to learn, to grow in, to share, to help people. So.
Yes, I see good things in your future, and I can't wait for what the next year is going to hold.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to join us for more discussions with me and other listeners, we can be found on most social media platforms, including a listener-run Facebook group called the Silver Linings Fireside Chat. For deeper conversations with our guests and live conversations with other listeners, you can join us on our Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Silver Linings Handbook. We've got 2 more great episodes before the end of the year. One, an interview with Bill Thomas, the brother of Kathy Thomas, a woman who died in what's known as the Colonial Parkway's murders. And we also have our end of the year wrap up, where we're going to touch on a lot of what we've talked about this year and hear from many of our awesome guests. Until then, I hope you guys enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you soon.